Hello and welcome to another video review, and today we're reviewing the latest Marvel movie, Captain Marvel. And before I start this video review, I'm going to go ahead and kind of address, there's been a lot of controversy surrounding Captain Marvel, specifically revolving around Brie Larson's comments during their kind of press junket for this movie. This movie review specifically is going to be controversy free. I'm not discussing that. If you guys want to look into that controversy, you can find that controversy and videos pertaining to that all over YouTube, all over the internet. I don't feel I need to add anything to that conversation, especially considering I feel like the movie that I'm reviewing here is mediocre at best. Unfortunately, to add that to it, I feel just does everything more of a disservice than anything else. Yes, there's controversy around this movie involving stuff that she said. Yes, I do have an opinion on that. No, I'm not really going to discuss that here. So if that's what you're looking for, that's not what this review is pertaining to. Specifically, I'm just going to pertain the 2-hour movie I just watched and tell you guys if I think it's good or if I think it's bad. And obviously, since I already called it mediocre, you guys can already guess which way I lean on the side of this. I'm going to preface this by saying I don't know anything about Captain Marvel. I'm not a Marvel person, as you guys know. I go and I see these movies. I didn't grow up as big of a Marvel kid as I did a DC kid. So there are some things I know about Marvel. I'm not a complete idiot, but there are other things about Marvel movies I just don't know. Captain Marvel is not a character I really knew much of anything about before I saw this movie. And unfortunately, after seeing the movie, I don't feel like I know that much more about her, unfortunately, than I did going into the movie. And the biggest issue I have with this entire movie, I have two real main issues with it. Number one is by Brie Larson's acting, I think is very wooden and very flat. And that's really concerning considering when you look at all the great characters that Marvel has produced over this first 10 years that they've been making these movies, Captain Marvel just feels so flat and so bland at times that you question this, a movie that came from the same people that brought us, Iron Man and Thor and Captain America and, different characters throughout the Marvel, cinematic universe, Black Widow and everything. Also, I do have to kind of snicker a little bit at Marvel saying, oh, this is the first female superhero movie we've ever made. It's not. They did make that terrible Elektra movie back in 2005. We've all kind of forgotten about that. But I always snicker when they state things like this. The same thing was stated with Black Panther when that came out last year. Hey, this is the first African-American superhero movie we've ever made. No, that's false. You guys made a trilogy of movies starring Blade, which is another very forgotten about character that I wish they would bring back. Even if you did a different actor, although I think bringing back Wesley Snipes as some sort of cameo in the Marvel Cinematic Universe would be awesome. I can totally get why they wouldn't do that at this point, but again, it's the same thing here where, hey, forget about what we did earlier. This is the first time we're doing it. No, it's really not. The problems I have besides her acting in this movie, which I think is just really flat and bland, especially for someone who's won an Academy Award, so it's really kind of concerning, is just the fact that the whole movie felt to me more like a TV movie than it did like I was actually going to see the next big Marvel movie. And that was one of the biggest concerns I had throughout the entire movie. The first hour of this 2-hour movie is your typical amnesia loss, hero story where, hey, the heroes lost their memory and you spend a good hour of this movie trying to figure out who this character is. It's incredibly lazy in that regard. We've done this story time and time again, and I don't think that this movie or this story added anything to that type of movie. And unfortunately, it kind of falls down those tropes. It plays on nostalgia a lot. I was really happy to hear a lot of the 90s music in this movie because that's the era that I grew up in. I was really, really happy to see that Smashing Pumpkins poster in the window in the early part of the movie, and that, things like that, pulled at me. Hearing Nirvana, Come As You Are in the movie, pretty awesome. Hearing No Doubt's Just a Girl, another awesome part of the movie. The way it's used, questionable, but it's cool to hear those things in the movie, and it was cool for them to pull at my specific nostalgia strings in this movie, but I feel like they didn't really add much to the movie, making it put in 1995. Another thing I'll say is all of the budget in this movie was spent on making Samuel L. Jackson look like he did 20 years ago, and it's very evident when they also put the guy who plays Agent Coulson, I can't remember the actor's name, he's also in this movie, albeit very brief compared to Samuel L. Jackson, but they did the same de-aging thing for him, and his de-aging just looks terrible. Like, when you put them side by side, which they do a couple times in this movie, to me it almost looked like his face was melting or something. Like, it looked laughably bad. There's a lot of CG in this movie, regardless of the Samuel L. Jackson stuff, that just looks laughably bad. There's things that they do with a specific character in this movie, and I don't want to spoil this movie for anybody. However, we will get to a spoiler section of this review, because I have to talk about these things, but there's a specific character in the movie that's mostly CG, and they just look horrible. And we'll get to that more in the spoiler section. So, the first hour of this movie, I felt like it didn't do anything new, different, or original. They're trying to kind of turn gears, I think, in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, especially with Brie Larson's Captain Marvel, and trying to make this great, big female superhero. And I don't have a problem with that. You know, I'm a guy who loved Wonder Woman, and I think that that was an incredible watershed moment for female-driven superhero movies 2 years ago. And I was hoping for the same thing for Captain Marvel, and unfortunately, it's not that. And the whole time that I watched the movie, I was like, man, they're really not doing it. And it just came off as almost laughably bad at times. It's not to say that Captain Marvel's a bad movie. I don't think it's a bad movie, but I would easily rank it among the worst of the Marvel Cinematic movies. You know, I'd rank it down there with Iron Man 3, which I think is the literal worst of the Marvel movies. And I know a lot of people disagree with me, but I really don't like Iron Man 3. Also, Thor: Dark World, another not great movie in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. I think it's right down there at the very bottom of these movies. And it's unfortunate because this really should have been, you know, the big watershed moment of, hey, we have our female superhero in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and I just feel like she's kind of a dud so far. And it's unfortunate because, you know, she just doesn't have the personality or the charisma, I think, to mix and match with all these other characters we've known for 10 years. She doesn't feel like someone who's just going to fit in, you know, in Avengers Endgame and go, hey, I'm here, guys, let's hang out. She doesn't feel like that at all. She just feels incredibly almost out of place. And that's another issue I have with the movie is, and this is kind of Marvel doing a disservice to this character and everything, but introducing such a prominent and powerful character that's obviously going to have big ramifications in Avengers Endgame, you know, in a month's time or whenever that, I think that movie comes out in literally like 6 weeks. It's hard to do. You know, you have to go back. They literally had to go back in time and give this girl an origin story so that we get to Endgame and now audiences can be caught up on her, you know, who she is and where she came from. Problem I have is, you know, after watching this 2-hour movie, I don't feel like I know much more other than, oh, you know, whatever. I didn't walk out of it going, man, I really can't wait to see more of this character. I walked out of it more concerned than anything else. So, anyways, that's kind of my, you know, spoiler-free part of this review. I will tell you guys, I'm being pretty harsh on this movie, but I'm giving it a C+. I think it's a very, very mediocre and weak Marvel movie. It's unfortunate because I really wanted this to be their Wonder Woman moment, and it's not. And maybe they can rectify that by making this Black Widow movie they keep talking about. I think that's a better character to lean into than Captain Marvel. So we'll get to the spoiler section of the review here, because I kind of got to talk about some of the things that they do in this movie. But spoiler-free, C+, that's what I'm giving it. So anyways, spoilers here from now out, so if you don't want to know anything about Captain Marvel, you can be done with this video, and that's fine. And thank you for watching. So, spoiler-wise, they do the first hour of this movie, it's her kind of amnesia thing, and then they piece it together that, you know, Carol Danvers, she is a human. She's not from an alien planet. It's done kind of bad. one of my biggest issues with this whole thing is there's a scene where she is shot down doing a mission with this other woman who actually is an alien from this alien race in this movie. And then Jude Law's character shows up, who's actually the real bad guy in the movie. And that's fine. He does a fine job. I've always liked Jude Law. And they kind of have a face-off. They're both holding each other up at gunpoint. Carol Danvers and Jude Law's character. And then Carol Danvers, she shoots this energy source thing that blows up, and she absorbs all the power. Issue I have with this is, yes, Jude Law's character, obviously he possesses some sort of power because he's an alien, but the issue I had here was, why doesn't he absorb any of his power? Why did it all go to her? Like, they didn't do a good job of explaining that part of this movie, or really what this power source is, other than, hey, she absorbed it, now she's basically Superman. And so, after that point of the movie, when they explain all this, obviously there's a big battle at the end. They tie in, I want to say, the blue dude, Ronan from Thor Dark World. I'm pretty sure that's what he was from, which I found it laughable that we're tying in the villain from arguably the worst Marvel movie into this one. So maybe that's also what kind of drags it down a little bit. I don't know. But they basically then... And this was my biggest issue with the entire movie, is they make her too powerful too fast. And now all of a sudden, she basically is Superman. So you have the end of this movie, she's basically throwing missiles, and she's flying through ships and blowing them up, and shooting people with her arm energy beams. And I just sit here, and it makes me concerned and worried for Endgame, because I don't want the end of that movie to be, hey, here's Captain Marvel, boom, one punch, Thanos is done. And if they do that, that's really disappointing. I have some faith that Marvel will tell the story that they're telling in a very good and intelligent way in Endgame. And I mean, they haven't proven me wrong yet when it comes to those stories. So there's some hope there, but I walked out of Captain Marvel very concerned, not only for the future of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, but also for how they're going to portray this character. Because again, like her, Brie Larson, she's so wooden and stiff throughout this entire movie, and she just doesn't possess the charisma or the charm that all these other Marvel characters have, all over these years. Even someone like, you look at a character like Black Widow, who hasn't had her own movie, and please make a Black Widow movie. I want that really bad. I think we all do, but even she has, a charisma and a charm to her. And Carol Danvers, she just doesn't in this movie. And I think maybe that's something you can build upon for Avengers Endgame. But for right now, I look at her next to these characters in my head, and I just don't see it. And that's really bad and really concerning. So, again, time will tell. In 6 weeks, Avengers Endgame comes out. Maybe I'm telling a different story, because I will review that movie too. And that's the thing. I wasn't planning on reviewing Captain Marvel. And then after I saw it, I was like, man, I really kind of need to review this movie. So, I'm trying to think of other things in the movie. As I talked about in the spoiler-free section, there is some very laughably bad CGI effects in this movie. Samuel L. Jackson, they de-aged him. It looks incredible, but you look at Agent Coulson, he looks really bad. And then you have a character in this movie, the cat. I believe the cat's name is Goose. And throughout the movie, they kind of play off some jokes on him and how, this cat's actually this other alien being that the other alien race in this movie, the Skrulls, are afraid of. And then they play on that by, it's like got tentacles that come out of its mouth, and it eats some people, and it also eats the Tesseract at one point in this movie. All of that CG looked really bad. And I'm glad by the end of this movie, and a major spoiler for the end of this movie, but when they have the end credit scene and they have that cat kind of throw up the Tesseract on Nick Fury's desk, I'm glad that that's done, so we can kind of maybe divorce ourselves from the cat. Not to say that the cat wasn't a good character. I like the cat. The cat was actually one of the best characters in the movie, but you need to make that CG better or get it out of the way. And I don't know if they could really do that between this and Avengers Endgame. That being said, at the end of the day, and I really, it pains me to stand here and say that I thought the movie was mediocre, because I really had a hope that, I hope they knock it out of the park like Wonder Woman, for DC was knocked out of the park. And they just didn't. And it's unfortunate, and I hope that they can course correct. I mean, I don't think necessarily that Brie Larson you know, maybe she is the right person for the role, maybe she's not the right person for the role, but I think you could course correct with some better writing. And we've seen time and time again, especially in the Avengers movies, the banter between these characters is always incredibly well written. And I think that with better writing, we could easily make her a better character. And that's my hope for Avengers Endgame, is they end up making her a better character than what was displayed here. So anyways, guys, that's my review of Captain Marvel. I hope you enjoyed this video. Again, I'm sorry I don't have my usual lavalier mic in the process of changing things in the game room here, and I lost it, so I have to get a new one. So if the audio sounds a little funky in this video, that's why. Anyways, remember to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. And as always, until next time.